Hi, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're glad to have you with us for today's presentation featuring Samuel Hill, Director of Product Marketing at Medigate. Samuel will discuss how healthcare delivery organizations are challenged with getting the most out of their connected devices. Whether they're spending valuable time looking for devices or manually inputting clinical data, these gaps make it difficult for BioMed and IT teams to do their jobs. Today, you'll learn how Medigate empowers HDOs with industry-leading visibility and accurate device data to inform operational workflows and maximize the effectiveness of teams and devices. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Medigate. Medigate provides award-winning cybersecurity for connected devices in hospitals. The platform combines a deep understanding of manufacturers' protocols and clinical workflows with cybersecurity expertise to deliver comprehensive and accurate identification, contextual anomaly detection, and clinical policy enforcement. The resulting automated, rule-based, and clinically driven security policies keep patients, networks, and PHI safe. For more information, please visit medigate.io. A few announcements before we get started. We're already planning the 2022 MD Expo in Atlanta. MD Expo strives to provide healthcare technology management professionals with a unique, intimate, and rewarding conference second to none. You don't want to miss our 20th anniversary in April of this year. Please visit MD Expo Show for details. Let's give one lucky attendee the opportunity to win a Webinar Wednesday shirt by answering the following question. From the MDS2 form, roughly what percentage of devices, bear with me for just a second, what percentage of devices would transmit, display, store, or modify personally identifiable information? For example, electronic protected health information. You can find the answer by visiting our sponsor's website. Please use the webinar dashboard to submit your answers. As always, today's webinar is eligible for one continuing education credit from the ACI. You can obtain your certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. We'll wrap up with a live Q&A. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar by using the questions feature on the GoToWebinar dashboard. We'll get through as many questions as time allows. As I mentioned earlier, our speaker today is Samuel Hill. Samuel, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Hey, thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone who is joining us today. I know personally, I am very excited to be joining you guys in Atlanta at MD Expo to share more about how Medigate can support you and your organizations as they deliver. So we're honored to participate and sponsor and be there as well. So we're looking forward to that very, very much. But today, I wanted to share with you a little bit around the topics of effectiveness for every single device that's in your organization. As you know, healthcare is indeed challenged by poor clinical device data, and this affects both your security and your operations. The security side of it, we need to enforce the right policy so that these devices remain secure. As our trivia question alluded to, many of these devices do store protected health information. They transmit them or they modify them in some way. And so the security of these devices is, I know, something that's top of mind, especially to the biomedical professionals who work on them. Believe it or not, they do care about the security of them. The other side of it, though, is these devices are a fleet and they operate as a fleet, and you have a lot of work to do to maintain them. So having more accurate data about the devices, about what they are, what they're doing, where all these different pieces can help significantly improve your operational workflows to make these devices more effective. And because of these challenges, Medigate built a leading platform so that healthcare can improve the effectiveness of every device. And here's how we do it. Well, first off, I'll share, sorry, I forgot the slide was in here, apologize for that. We've been trusted by well over 130 healthcare customers all over the globe, and this is thousands of hospitals. And Medigate is a completely healthcare focused portion of now our parent company, Clarity, focused on delivering OT, IT, IOHT, cybersecurity, and efficiency. We focus on healthcare. In fact, we were best in class for healthcare IoT security last year. And the reasons for that is because of our deep focus on the visibility of network traffic that these devices are sending. As you all know, these devices connect to networks and they send information across these networks. We see that traffic and we can use that specific instance of network traffic to identify, profile, and provide a deep dive of information to you as an operator of these devices so you can better understand what they're doing. We speak the language of these devices, which is what makes us unique, and we have well over 165 individual unique medical device languages, proprietary protocols. We call it parsing. We've parsed these languages, and we've seen well over 10 million devices, and I think about 1 million unique medical devices, if I recall. So we've worked on this challenge significantly, and we've been trusted by so many customers all over the world to help them solve the challenge of poor data that causes an impact to their security and their operations. So let's talk about how we can help you improve device effectiveness within your organization. I think there are 3 pieces of information that are listed here that you need to improve the effectiveness of these devices. The first thing, I'll start at the bottom, is you need an accurate inventory. And I know all of you have worked in your CMMS tools, whichever ones that you're using, or other asset management tools to maintain as close to up-to-date of a database as you possibly can about these devices. And the challenges with that work are just they're so numerous. You have to, typically, the workflow is you have to go find the device, validate and verify the information about the device, whether it's its serial number or MAC address or other defining characteristics, and then go input that information into the CMMS. Well, Medigate takes the opposite approach. We know the device is transmitting on the network, and we can understand what is being said about what that device is saying. So we use those data packets to understand how and what the unique things about this device are, and then feed that information in a dynamic and regular fashion into your CMMS. And we also pull unique pieces of information from your CMMS, like your unique identifier, your CMMS ID, or whether the device is an owned or leased device based off of your procurement cycle for them. And we then can update our platform with really relevant information based off of your CMMS as well. So the inventory has to be maintained and has to be kept up to date, which I know today is a significant challenge for many hospitals all over the world. And so we sought to apply the data we already have to help solve this challenge. The second thing you need to understand about the devices to improve their effectiveness is a simple question when you think about it conceptually. It's hard to answer, but it's a really germane question. The utilization. How often are these devices being used to do their job? And it's, with thousands of these devices all over your hospital, each device that costs thousands of dollars, knowing how much they're being used, how often they're actually employed and doing their work, that's something that's a useful data metric for a lot of different business processes across your organization. So the utilization of these devices is tracked in a real way by looking at the network traffic, and we can tell when the device is sending traffic in the context of doing its job, or when it's just sending traffic in the context of command and control, or checking back in with the control unit to get a software update, or any of those things that are not necessarily the specific execution of its primary job function. So effectively, we can tell when the IV pump is connected to the network because it's infusing a medication to a patient, and we can track that and say it is doing its job currently, and we can track the utilization rate over time. On average, based off of our research and what we've observed in our customers, a medical device, like an infusion pump being a good example, a medical device that actually is sitting idle around 58% of the time. So the majority of the time that this device is in your system, it's not working. That's the incorrect way of saying it. Of course it's working. You guys maintain them and keep them operational, but it's not actually doing the job that you have employed this device to do. And if you had a person on your team that reported to you that was only working 42% of their work hours, I think you'd probably have a conversation and put that employee on an improvement plan. So the same thing, we could track the utilization of these devices, how often they're being used to do their work, and then give good, accurate data that you can make informed decisions about operational workflows. And the third piece I think helps with the effectiveness of these devices is knowing where they are in the environment, knowing the physical location. So because again, we see them transmit on the network, we can give you a rough idea of where they are based off of their wireless network connection, or if they're a physically plugged in device, the actual physical room and location that they're plugged into. This location helps out significantly when it comes down to, we actually had a customer report this to us. They said, typically when you got to do preventative maintenance on a device, they said about 10% of the fleet that you can't find. Comes time for that. Every year you got to run all the glucometers through PM. Typically 10%, they said, you cannot find them no matter what you do. So, well, what is the typical workflow? You put on your running shoes to work that day and you go walk the floors of the hospital trying to find the glucometers that have not been through the preventative maintenance cycle. And, while that can be fun, you get to see people, out on the floors and chat with, nurses and leadership and folks out there. And it's, that's all positives, but the actual work that you're doing of walking to find them can take hours. In fact, they estimated this, our customer did, that it was about 500 hours, employee hours. Obviously, you're not one person not doing 500 hours worth of work consecutively. It's multiple people doing this work. But if you think about how much time and energy and resources being dedicated to simply finding a device that's on the network, that's very ineffective use of highly skilled biomedical technician time, biomedical engineering time, the people that are actually out there. You guys have better things to do with your life and with your professional skills than walking a hallway trying to find a glucometer or you name whatever the device is. So the location of these devices is highly important to help improve the effectiveness of it. Now, at Medigate, we have developed this platform that brings data into your systems to help you operationalize and plan them. And we gather this data from a whole multitude of different sources on the left, the network management tools, real-time location systems, the radiology system or your EMR, the actual device logs, the PAC system, the radiology PAC system, your CMMS itself, and also we look at network traffic. This is the core of what we do. We look at the network traffic to gather a bunch of information. It all exists in the Medigate platform today, and we also then apply things like benchmarks. How much should this device be used? How many devices should you have based off of your number of beds? What other metrics can we use to help normalize and give informed decision-making back to you so you can help the life cycle of these devices? If you look at your system and the benchmark says you should only have 10 devices per bed, but your report shows that you have 100 devices per bed, might be something to look into. We can maybe help make some decisions about life cycle, whether to buy more of those devices, probably not buy more of those devices, those kind of decisions. We also bring in the financial costs of understanding how much does this device cost, what's the cost to lease it, what's the cost to buy it, and from that we produce these recommendations that we can help you understand. Taking these action steps will significantly improve the operational cost of these devices, but also the workflows to understand how things are happening. So at this point, I'm going to transition to the Medigate platform itself and show you kind of what this looks like in our world. I hope that there are questions that are being dropped into the Q&A so that we can answer them. I look forward to engaging that. But this time I'm going to get over to our demo here and show you a little bit about what we're talking about. This is the Metagate dashboard itself. We have a whole bunch of different data points about a device. On the left over here, we show that we have just around 11,500 devices connected to the network. These are IT devices, Internet of Things devices, medical devices, all of these different pieces. We can see that breakdown here. We have 7,700 medical, IoT, IT devices. However many of these are online, we've classified them in a risk methodology, saying these are high risk. And even these devices are showing significant indicators of compromise that IT security should take a look at right away. What I'm going to look at here is our operational efficiency things here. So we'll look at the utilization dashboard within our operational efficiency thing. So these are all of the different medical devices that are connected to the network. So we have 84 device types. And I could actually let's look at this category. Let's make it to a medical device only. So here are the medical devices that are connected to your network. And you see a lot of them that you probably recognize and work on. We have things like defibrillators, we have the patient monitors, we have the infusion pumps, which is always the favorite, the glucometers, these very highly specialized robotic surgery arms, different pieces there, different radiological devices and stuff. And so let's look at something as useful as a glucometer. So we have a glucometer here, and we're looking at this. This device, again, there you go, 52% of the time it's active. So this is right within what we've kind of arbitrarily determined the overall healthy range of activity. Now, it's obviously not going to be used 100% of the time. That's a dream that's not achievable. But we want to make sure that it's being used regularly. So now there are 216 of these devices, if we look at them, that are in the underutilized range. So some of these, with an activity rate of 0, here's one with an activity rate of 49%. So you can start to see different devices and how often they're being used on your network, which could also help start making decisions about life cycle, or how many of these should you actually have, all of this different stuff. As you can see here, there's a little bit of an imbalance actually. You got about 130 devices that are in the optimal range. You have 80 devices that are being overutilized, and about 216 that are being underutilized. We could probably balance that out a little bit so that these overutilized devices, maybe that specific area needs more glucometers, and so we could start shifting par leveling around. So understanding that. The other thing is also the hours distribution. How often are they being used, and when are they being used? What part of the day? So this is really crucial, I think, for a lot of times for preventative maintenance to say, when should I begin do the work? When should I go grab that device to make sure I run its BIOS testing or whatever you got to do? Looking at the hours of use distribution can help you understand different pieces of when should I grab that device, and when's an available window to do that. So looking back again at the utilization metrics here, we're going to look at medical devices. So this is the first thing here. So the other thing that I'll say is so I should start at the bottom like I did earlier. So this is the CMMS integration piece. This is the reconciliation that we do between your asset inventory, your CMMS, and what Medigate is currently seeing on the network itself. So here's the inventory on the right side here of what all the CMMS assets. There's 7,100, 7,200 CMMS assets. Well, we're seeing about 11.5. Now these network assets, a little closer here, the clinical devices, 7,000 clinical devices, the CMMS network assets around 6,200. So there's a gap there. And how many devices match? We matched 5,200 to that matches there. But there are, 942 unmatched devices between what we're seeing on the network and what's being listed in your CMMS. And so there's things that we could do. So unmatched devices, let's take a look at that. So looking at a lot of infusion pumps that are showing as unmatched, different areas of things that we're seeing on the network that are not showing up in your CMMS. And so being able to then reconcile that information is very, very important. And the nice thing about the Medigate data platform is that it's feeding the network traffic, the data we're getting, in a dynamic fashion. So you're not having to worry about manually going to find that device to update it. Pulling the information and getting it into your system becomes a regular operation instead of something you have to do manually. The second thing I talked about was actually the location of these devices. I'm sorry, was the utilization. So I talked about the utilization there. We talked about how we can start tracking how often these devices are being used, and that helps us out with a lot of different things. The last thing I said was around the location of these devices. So look at location maps. We actually pull the map from the network management software that you're using, and we start reporting on where these devices are connecting and where they are located. So let's look at a device floor that's got 15 devices on it. Now I know your floors have way more devices than 15. I get that. But looking at this Albany building, it's building number 1, floor number 4 in our demo environment, and here is roughly where these devices are connected. We can see the devices that are connected here. Here's a listing of them. So this is these are all infusion pumps, it looks like, these 8 devices, and we know roughly that they are actually right there. So clicking on it even more specifically, drilling into the device itself, we can see the different data points that we're getting about this device from the network traffic, all the different device-specific identifications, down to the operating system and versions of the software running on the device. What network is it connecting to, and how is it connecting to that network? Is it in a network segmentation that's only for these medical devices and that kind of thing? What network security policies are being applied to it? and then location. If we click on this little map here, it shows us the specific location. So now the workflow would be, you're looking for a device that's got an asset acquisition date here, or you got a serial number. Let's see if we have the serial number of it. Here it is, your serial number. You can't find this device. It's been stashed in a closet by a nurse in a patient's room, and you need to do something to this device. You know, I have the serial number. You come to the Medigate platform, and if I were to go home, just our main dashboard, let's run a search against that specific device serial ID. Hey, look, there it is. There's that device right there. And now I can go and say, where is it? I'm going to click on this map and show, oh, okay, building 1, floor number 4, roughly right about in there somewhere. That's where it's transmitting and connecting to the network from, so that we can then go and be very specific and granular about finding that device. I mentioned the customer earlier who reported to us that, you know, the 10% of devices that they're not able to find typically during a preventative maintenance cycle, and how it takes them around 500 hours to find those devices. After the Medigate platform provided them location data, they reduced that number down to 2 hours, which was obviously a significant savings for them from, you know, the workload on their biomedical engineers, but also from the devices themselves. More devices were able to remain in compliance and remain available to the front lines so that they could do the jobs that they need to do. So we talked about how the CMMS needs to be maintained and have real up-to-date inventory. We talked about how the utilization rates of these devices is something that we can track and start to make decisions based off of. And we also talked about how location can help you streamline your workflows to find these devices and do interesting things. Now let's look at something that we're very proud of, and these are what we're calling our efficiency recommendations. And these are specific actions that we're recommending in this demo environment. It would obviously be very, you know, specific to your world, but in this demo environment, we're recommending that your organization take some of these actions. And we break them down into different categories. We have either an inventory category, a maintenance category, or a utilization category to work with. And then we have different types of devices. So whether it's lost devices, offline, overdue preventative maintenance, rented or retired devices. So just reading down through here, in this recommendation, there are 1,082 devices that are labeled as rented in your CMMS, but are underutilized. Now, you all know that there's times when you just need more devices based off of either a surge in patients or capacity or whatever the demand is. And so you'll rent them, or maybe that's the financial plan, is renting devices. But each of those devices costs you significant money. And so these devices that are not being utilized as effectively, that's a lot of money that you're paying to lease a device that's not being used. So looking through these devices and being able to decide how many of them could be returned back to our rental agency is a fairly quick way to return budget into your operational life cycle. Secondly here, 172 patient monitors that have not been online within the last 3 months. So the last time we saw this device connect and transmit on the network was 3 months ago. Maybe there's a lot of reasons for it. Maybe there's something physically broken on the device, but they've not managed to get it into your repair cycle or get it into the dirty utility room, soiled utility room for it to be brought down to the lab so you can get to work on it. Maybe they just have so many of them they don't need them or things like that. A lot of reasons for why this device went down the network, but most of them, we should find those devices and get them back on the network so that we can keep the system moving. Looking at these devices that have been marked as retired in your CMMS, but are currently online. We've seen them online the network within the last 14 days. I mean, you all know what happens. You try and find the device, you can't find it. It's probably gone missing. Maybe it walked out the door, or who knows what happened. So you mark it as, you know, lost or retired, or we're no longer going to track it. However, when we see that device actually transmitting in the course of doing its job, so what that means is now you have a device that you've marked as lost or missing or retired in your CMMS, but is still on the floor providing patient care and doing the job that you need it to. And when you have it marked as retired, you're no longer tracking it for preventative maintenance. You're no longer tracking it for software updates and patches or security risk or any of those things. This is a very risky device that's now out there. Imagine an infusion pump that hasn't received the latest pharmacy library. And maybe has, who knows, maybe there's dosing guideline changes, maybe there's different things that needed to be updated, but it did not receive those because it was no longer being tracked by the CMMS, and it's still currently being used to treat patients, as we see, because it's been online in the last 14 days. So it's still around. We need to do something with it. Vital sign monitors that have not been online in the last 3 months. Here's one, preventative maintenance, 108 preventative patient monitors that their last preventative maintenance date was over a year ago. Now that might be fine. That might be well within your scope, your compliance requirements to keep these devices in preventative maintenance, or it might not. Your schedule might be that every device has to go through PM once a year, regardless of if they need it or not. And if that's the case, this is a quick way to identify these devices that missed their last PM cycle, and so you can begin to rectify that and get them in tolerance. So overdue preventative maintenance, lost devices, 24 devices labeled as lost or missing, but were seen online in the last month. Overdue preventative maintenance, lots of different things that we can specifically recommend for you to start rectifying these devices in your system to improve their effectiveness across the entire life cycle. So with that, I will pause to take a breath. I see that we have some questions that have been coming in. We'll go ahead and start answering them here just shortly. And so Jennifer, if you can help me with collating the questions, that would be wonderful. And we'll look forward to answering them. I really appreciate everybody's time, and I hope that we've been able to share a little bit of our perspective about each and every device that you've invested thousands of dollars into, both from an acquisition perspective and an operational perspective. They need to be used at a higher level of effectiveness. So to put a real fine point on our final talking point here, this is real dollar savings for your organization. Being able to use these devices effectively. I would imagine, every single year, we actually know this. On average, we've done the conversations with customers and looked at the industry and averaged this out. On average, a typical hospital will actually replace about 10% or buy an additional 10% more devices each year. Now, those devices are used to replace the lost or missing devices, but it's also because more devices are needed. The consistent demand from the frontline care teams is for more devices. There's nothing worse than a nurse who's looking to do their job, but they can't find the device they need to do their job. And so the request from the nursing managers goes and says, we need to buy more devices. We actually had a customer, they came to us, they reported to us that they were able to look at a request for, I think, about 700 infusion pumps. We average out the cost of an infusion pump to be about $3,500. So 700 infusion pumps is a little north of $2 million worth of asset acquisition cost. They looked at the data in their platform and showed we actually have devices that are in storage that are not being used. We had well over enough devices to fulfill that need of the frontline units without having to buy more. So they avoided a significant capital expenditure to buy more devices, and they instead used what they already had in their environment in a more effective way to meet the best part, they still met the needs of the frontline units for the devices that they were requesting to do their job. So this is the type of data. We had one of our customers, a CISO, he said, this platform helps him and his peers come to a common data platform to look at to begin making decisions about, do we buy more devices? Do we not? How better can we distribute and utilize these devices? What's our preventative maintenance cycle supposed to be like? How do we improve what we already have to deliver the value that our frontline teams expect from us? And that I know each and every one of you deliver on a day in and day out basis. So with that, I thank you for your time and your attention today. Jennifer, I look forward to the questions that have come in as we're talking. I look forward to all your questions. So feel free, if you are thinking of them and if there's any that are sparking in your mind, drop them into our Q&A so that we can make sure that we answer them. So Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel, for all of this valuable information. As a reminder to the audience, if you have a question for our presenter, please use the questions feature on your webinar dashboard. As Samuel mentioned, we do have some that have come in already, so we'll start with those. Our first one is, what if the device is not online? How do you track location?
This is a very astute question asker, whoever asked that question. Thank you for it. That's wonderful. So obviously, if we're tracking network connection and network location for a device, that could be something that's a challenge if the device is turned off and is not connecting to the network. So we are integrating and have integrated with some of the real-time location system vendors to incorporate that real-time location, whether it's an RFID tag or some type of thing, the Bluetooth, whatever it is, on the device itself to report into the system so we can get that real-time information about a device's location.
All right, our next question is, can you find the devices that have been hidden?
Yeah, that's one of, I actually remember this. So my backstory is I spent 7 years as a patient care tech in the emergency room. And part of that job is I needed to make sure that my doctors and nurses had all the tools they needed to care for the patients that were in our ER. And IV pumps were such a classic example. I mean, I can't tell you the number of conversations we'd have from our management that would tell us, hey, when you take a patient from the ER and bring them up to med surg or ICU, and a lot of times they have an IV pump attached to them, infusing a medicine or of course a treatment. The conversation is make sure you get another pump. If you're leaving a pump, take a pump. Take one, bring one back. You've got to make sure you have a balance. Don't lose pumps when you transfer patients. But somehow we always ran out of IV pumps. And so what happens in that environment? You start to hide them. You find a closet, you get them into your supply room, you hide them because you know that you're going to need them. And there's nothing worse than not having the tools you need to do the job when you need to do it. So yes, we can help find those hidden devices. In fact, one of our customers, they actually were able to find 3,000 devices. They're a very large academic medical center, so they have a ton of devices. They were able to find about 3,000 devices that had not connected to their network in about 6 months. And so these devices were just sitting in closets, patient rooms. In fact, they told us one of them, they're like, it was behind a door that we never would have looked at. We would have never thought to go into that space. But there was a device that they needed to find, and there it was. So yes, absolutely, we can find those devices that are hidden because we see them transmit on the network, and we can provide you with the location. And so then you'll know this specific device with these characteristics that I need to do something with. I know where it is because it's in this room. Now you might walk into that room and have to open the cabinet doors. We can't tell you it's in that cabinet, but you have to go look around a little bit for it. But your odds of finding it once you're in the room, I think, are pretty high.
All right, our next question is, what about device security?
Yeah, so I know this is something that a lot of biomedical engineers are really focusing on. In fact, we're starting to see this convergence of worlds. I know you all care about the security of your devices because, they're touching patients, and we want to keep our patients safe and receiving care, but also that means we need to keep our devices safe and all of these different things. So with the Medigate data, we see so much about this device, and we actually report on known vulnerabilities or exploits or all the different things that you would expect, so that you can understand how to best deal with the traffic this device has. Now, so a new vulnerability is published on a whatever device, you name the device. We all know the device manufacturers, sometimes they'll release the right software patch for it. And then you need to know, do I have that device? One, you want to know if you have the device in your environment. Two, is the operating system and the application version something that I need to worry about based off of this threat? And then three, is there a patch available? What steps should I take? So you can have a real clear plan of action for all the devices that come up in the security context. And so that's where we can provide a lot of that data because we know so much about each and every device that's connected. So you can then make the decisions you need to. A lot of times, I think, it's a very low percentage. I think 15 to 20% of the time, the device will receive a software patch to take care of the vulnerability that they have. So most of the time, you're going to be working with your network team and your security team to provide the right level of segmentation for these devices so that they can continue to operate while your network and your patients can remain relatively safe from a security perspective. So Medigate got our start in device security. In fact, we built our data platform to solve a lot of the security use cases. And then a lot of our customers were like, hey, actually, this data is very useful. It could be useful for so many different other parts of our hospital operation, and specifically biomed. And so we began to develop the application of this data that we are already collecting for the security use cases to help solve the challenges that we began to hear that a lot of biomedical engineers face on a day-to-day basis.
Great. All right, our next question, and I think that you did touch on this a little as part of another answer,
Yeah.
but I thought I would go ahead and ask it. Does your system track devices when they are off as well as on?
Yes. So when they're on, we're seeing them transmit on the network, and we can track, are they doing their job? Are they in the course of providing whatever that device is scheduled to provide? Even down to the radiology, those big heavy iron radiology devices, we can track down to what type of scan is being conducted by that CT, or what study is happening from that ultrasound machine. We can track down to that level of detail and begin reporting out on the utilization rates of those specific devices as well. So yes, we see the device when they're on the network, when they're powered up and transmitting, we see their traffic, so we can track them there. When they're powered off, that is a challenge, because obviously devices that are not transmitting on the network are the same as the analog devices that run around and are not connected to the network because they're just powered off. So we use things like RTLS and RFID tags or BLE beacons to report into our system the physical location of that device. So even when it's powered off, we still have ways to accurately track the physical location of the device itself.
All right, our next question is it possible to integrate any MMS brand, such as EQ2 or HEMS?
Sorry, a CMMS brand? Brand. I'm sorry, I thought you said the word grand, Jennifer. That really threw me off. Absolutely, yeah. The CMMS platforms are an integral partner to us in this process. And we have integrated and very robust integrations with all of the major players, whether it's Nuvolo, whether it's TMS, Accruent or TMS. I think we have, what was that one? Metamizer is another one. We also work with managed, the kind of some of the management things, like TriMedics is a big partner of ours we work with, to provides a managed device services, if you will, for a lot of organizations. And so, yeah, your CMMS platform of choice is one that we would support and integrate with, and we can push data to them, and we also pull data from the CMMS tool itself.
Our next question is, how does the Medigate program risk assessment?
Oh, how does the risk assessment piece work in the Medigate platform is I think what it's saying. We actually built a kind of a risk scoring framework that takes into account a lot of different features of, one, the device itself, FDA class. Does this device, what's the blast radius? If something happened to this device, what's the worst possible outcome? If a medical device that's connected to a patient gets breached or compromised, potentially there could be negative patient outcomes. And so that's a really terrible outcome. And so the blast radius is really large. So we built this risk scoring framework that helps to track different pieces. And then we also generate recommendations based off of best practice for security policies. We think all medical devices should be in their own isolated, separate network, if you will, virtual network. So it's called a VLAN, a virtual network. IV pumps should be only talking to IV pumps in their own network, and we need to use network techniques to provide that segmentation. So we recommend those policies. We actually recommend and can help you generate the specific lines of code to go right onto your network switches to enforce that policy or have that policy enforced. And so the risk score is fluctuating based off of the different components. Are there known vulnerabilities for that device? Is there, is urgent 11 an applicable vulnerability? Log4j, obviously everybody's talking about Log4j. Is that applicable to this device? And what can we do about it? What should we do about it based off of those things? And so you can customize the risk score framework based off of how your organization would like to assess risk and the specific characteristics of risk. And I'd happily dive into more of that, but we are running a little bit out of time, but I'm happy to dive more into that with anybody that would like to see that specifically.
All right, our next question is, how accurate is the RTL? Less than 10 or 5 feet?
RTLS, it depends on the methodology. So there's a couple different ways. So RTLS, if it's Bluetooth can get down to 3 meters, which is less than 10 feet. 5 to 10 feet, and it gets even more accurate the more Bluetooth receivers or Bluetooth sources you have to. It's called trilaterate. So you have 3 points of contact, but the more you have, the more accurate it is. With RFID, that's a little thing that's sending or receiving a signal from like a Wi-Fi beacon or a Wi-Fi system itself. And so that relies on a little different technology to do that. There's actually a new IEEE protocol around that measures round trip time between the wireless access point, the device, and then the device back to the wireless access point. It does some complicated math to compute its physical location there. So there are a lot of different techniques, each of them becoming more accurate. There's also, I think like Centrac uses they use like radar, if you will, to help start tracking some of this. So there's a lot of different techniques. Each of them have varying levels of accuracy, but really, it's more accurate than the device is off the network. We can't see where it is. So any level of accuracy beyond that is helpful in many instances.
All right, our next question is an interesting one, I think. Would there be an option if a device from one hospital is found in another hospital? For example, if an ambulance took a piece of equipment?
Absolutely. That's a great use case for this, because, if that shows back up in your hospital, you would have tagged those asset IDs as belonging to this specific site. So if you see that asset ID all of a sudden show up on a network that's not that specific site, you would be able to have that as an actionable alert that says, yeah, we should probably go collect that or figure out what's going on there, because your PAR level is getting all messed up there. So yeah, absolutely, that's a great use case for the location of the device. And you're absolutely right. Ambulances walk off with all sorts of things. From my time in the ER, we used to have a phrase: you have to make devices that can be paramedic proof, because they're smart human beings. Those women and men, they're really awesome, but they are hard on their devices. And so they end up taking stuff and doing weird things with it. It's quite unique.
All right, thank you again, Samuel, for your time today and for a fantastic presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the services they provide to our industry. Please visit Medigate.io. A quick reminder to our audience that you can obtain your continuing education certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed to you 1 hour after the end of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download your certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll be back soon with another webinar. Please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and for complimentary registration. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.